Welcome to another episode of Civic Affairs. I'm here with my co-host, Andy Martins. Now, before we get into our show tonight, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that happened at Council last week.
All right,
It was a very eventful session, considering the fact that it was the last one until the new council is elected.
Well, actually, there's one more.
There's one more.
It confused me to November 5th.
But the new council members will be elected at this point.
They'll have the, I believe...
They won't be in office, but they'll be elected.
That's right.
So this was the last council where the cards are kind of in the air right now. So one of the things that kind of caused a stir up was the visual branding project.
It did, yeah, it did, and it stirred me up too, because I was asking the question, why now? And it left council kind of playing on different teams. They're, if we can use the cliche, they weren't playing on the same team, because some were questioning why now, and
others.
Yeah.
And so I talked to Tom Baer, the Deputy CAO of Community Development and Enterprise Services. I spoke with him on Friday about the project, just to kind of clarify some of the misconceptions around it. Now, from what I understand, this is phase 2 of this kind of project that they've started with branding and marketing, and this is going to be more of an implementation phase, where they're going to get some materials and how to actually use them. Now, this could overhaul some of the traditional logos that we've grown accustomed to in Sault Ste. Marie. This could be it could be new, or they could implement some of the old projects. Only time will tell. One thing that's for sure, though, is the new council, whoever it may be, whether it be mostly incumbents or mostly new, before anything is implemented, it will go back to them for final approval. Now, those who voted for, it was a 9-3 vote, Mayor Provenzano and councillors Christian, Hollingsworth, Huppanen, Niro, Turco, Bruni, Grandinetti, and Krumpotich. And those against were Butland, Myers, and Fata. But they were pretty firmly set against it, those three that were against it. They spoke very openly about why wasn't it local, why now, and what even is our brand. But I think asking that question kind of answers it in itself. What is our brand? Well, that's why we need a branding strategy.
Well, that's right. It's got to have a broad appeal, and our current branding strategy is not broad enough. Hence, you've got
evidently something's not working.
Right.
Now, another thing that caused a little bit of a stir up at council was the Norgoma. As always, it is making waves, so to speak.
Did it ever.
As something I really liked when I wrote my story, I titled it, as Susan Meyer said, the elephant in the room, or the ship in the marina. And basically, they've now voted to move the ship in the spring if the Norgoma board cannot find a new home for it. It has to be moved by the time the ice melts.
Right, April of 2019.
Yeah, and that vote passed much closer than the previous one we were talking about. So Mayor Provenzano and councillors Butland, Christian, Shoemaker, Huppanen, and Bruni all voted for the ship to be moved. And those who voted against the resolution included Myers, Hollingsworth, Turco, Fata, Krumpotich, and Grandinetti. Now, Susan Myers made a pretty desperate plea to council about the importance of keeping the Norgoma where it is. And she implored council not to vote with personal bias or with personal vendettas, but to vote with wisdom. So it seemed as though she was speaking in particular to certain councillors, but who knows what goes on behind the scenes.
I think Councillor Myers is right. City staff and the mayor were voting on this issue based on personal opinion. And she said that careful wisdom doesn't act on personal opinion. So she really laid it out like you haven't seen her too often. So it was very passionate.
Now, Councillor Shoemaker came in last week and spoke with Luann about the Norgoma, because he's pretty firmly set against it being moved. And the way he looks at it, from what I gather from his perspective, is that they're just going to be at council's door looking for help again in 6 months or in a year. It always comes back to it's not bringing in enough money. It has spurts of time where it's bringing in money, and then it lulls and they end up needing help again. So we'll see what happens there. But again, this is a decision that could be changed once council.
Depending on whether this is a change election or where we're going in a couple of weeks with it, for sure.
Absolutely. So in terms of tonight's show, we have Sandra Hollingsworth, who is a Ward 2 councillor currently running in Ward 1. We also have Councillor Ozzie Grandinetti, who is currently in Ward 6 running for Ward 5.
Right.
And lastly, we have Rick Niro, who will be running in Ward 4.
The number doesn't change.
That
for
number
him.
doesn't change.
Exactly.
So it should be an exciting lineup. These are all incumbents. These are all people who are being faced with the task of defending their last few years and making a bid against some young or new faces. So
These three councillors have never been on the show, so
yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be exciting to hear what they have to say. And we'll be back with our first guest, Sandra Hollingsworth, just after this break. Stay tuned for Civic Affairs.
Basically was successful
Right.
and moving on to being MP.
So you filled his spot, essentially. Did you ever run before that?
No.
No? So that was your first bid?
Yes, because I moved back to Sault Ste. Marie about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm a great believer that moving back to your own community, you should become involved. And before I went on council, I was involved with many different projects, such as starting one of the first community gardens and also helping out the art gallery. So at that time, I gained some experience and some understanding of the different issues in our community, and I felt it was time to run.
Time to run? Mm-hmm. Now, so you've only been on council for about two and a half years, 2 years, versus other incumbents who most of them have been on for 4.
Or more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you navigate those waters going into it as a newbie, but like really the only newbie, because it wasn't an official election, right? It was a by-election.
Exactly. In those 2.5 years when I first came on, there was no orientation, for example.
Absolutely.
Usually when the whole group is elected and brought on to council, there's a full orientation. What you do is you spend time with the city clerk to understand the processes. You spend time with the mayor's office to fully gauge yourself, to appreciate how meetings are run, and you look at other councillors and use them for mentors and ask them for guidance. Because the bottom line is you want to be effective, you want to be able to voice your opinions and represent your constituents in a proper manner, but you have to do some background and your own research to fully understand how a council meeting works so that you can be effective.
Do you think that there are some pitfalls or downsides come now that you're campaigning against people who have been in office before?
Mm-hmm. Do I think there's any pitfalls? Can you explain further what you mean by that?
Or even maybe pitfalls isn't the right word. Maybe just, do you ever see yourself at a disadvantage?
No, because in 2.5 years I have done a lot of ideas, brought ideas to the table.
Right.
I'm a great believer that if you're at council, you're not there just to read the reports and go yes or no, but to get out to your constituents and ask for ideas. In 2.5 years, Riley, as you know, I'm on the social services board, and I'm happy to say that I brought an idea where we now will have social housing for adults with developmental disabilities. When I started knocking on doors 2.5 years ago, some of my constituents said, Sandra, I have adults with developmental disabilities, but there's no social housing.
Right.
I was shocked, absolutely shocked. And so, long story short, I brought the autism group to the table, and I also brought Breaking Away, which is a charity, to the table. I brought parents that have adults with developmental disabilities to the table. And after a good year and a half of lobbying Mike Nadeau, the Executive Director of Social Services, we're starting the first pilot this fall. And with the support of the Social Services Board, I'm happy to say that we're going to have a number of new units. It's a pilot project, and Community Living of Algoma is also part of this. Well, so that's an example where I basically went out, listened to constituents, and brought an idea to the table, and now it's happening.
Absolutely. So I mean, one thing I've heard a lot through the events I've covered too, and even the stories that I've pursued, is that there isn't a lot of thought given to adults with disabilities. There's a lot for children, but then it's like they kind of, there's this worry amongst parents anyway that they kind of fall into this category afterwards where they're just kind of like put into society without the proper tools and resources available.
Well, I can speak about developmental disabilities such as autism. Over the 2.5 years since I've been on council, I've drawn closer to the autism group. And I know that after the age of 21, the school system doesn't have any other programs for them. So unfortunately, they are relying on other programs in our community. But sometimes after a while, because of their age, they're slowly weeded out.
Right.
So that's how Breaking Away started. It was charity started about 10 years ago by parents that have adults with developmental disabilities, so that their children, after the education system, the formal education systems finish at 21, they now have a program
have an
to go
outlet.
to. Exactly.
Now, how do you feel, because you're now moving from Ward 2
Right.
into Ward 1.
Yep, you
now,
got it.
does this have something to do with the boundary shifting, or was this a decision based on something else?
Couple things. The main reason, I live in Ward 1.
Okay.
And I am a strong believer that you should live in the ward that you represent. Since I live in Ward 1, it only makes sense that I represent Ward 1. The other piece too, I came in through a by-election, as you know, for Ward 2. I did and was born and raised in Ward 2. My parents still live in Ward 2.
Right.
But I'm a strong believer that where you live is where you should represent.
And that's why you chose to switch over in this year's election.
Exactly.
So we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with Sandra Hollingsworth, because I have a couple more questions about her last couple years and her hopes for the future. Stay tuned on Civic Affairs. We're back on Civic Affairs with Sandra Hollingsworth. Now, Sandra, in your campaign, I think I actually read it in that brochure that you have there, you talk about inefficiencies at City Hall. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. My background is economics. My background also includes a family business. And so I'm very actively involved with our family business here in Sault Ste. Marie. And I still believe that there's some business principles, basic business principles that you can apply to City Hall.
Right.
So for example, I'm on the finance committee for council, and since I've been on the finance committee for just 2 years, I have noticed that there are some inefficiencies. For one piece, one of my first resolutions I put forward was to redo the terms for the finance committee. The other piece too, which I was surprised about coming on council, is how often that we don't get to see the budget.
Right.
When I first came on council, we were only exposed to the budget at council meetings twice a year. How can you make a decision if you're not familiar with the budget?
Well, there could be months in between those two times, right?
And the other piece too, which most people would recognize, is that you should be debating the budget in not the current year where it's going to be effective, but before the new year starts.
Right.
And before your year end. That's what we do in our business, and that's what the city council and the city hall should be doing.
Right.
The other piece too, which I'm happy to say that we just started just about 2 weeks ago, is a mapping process. We have many different departments in City Hall that invoice each other, as an example. Or we have an accounting department, but you have a bookkeeper here, a bookkeeper there.
Right.
There's some basically inefficiencies, duplication. So we're starting a duplication mapping process to see if there's any policies that are the same. Is there any operations, procedures that are the same
Right.
that could be merged together? These are simple ways to save on money.
Right.
And the other big piece, which my colleague who's you're going to interview is Grandinetti, is going to talk about building permits. More things should be put online at City Hall to reduce the costs as well. And with our busy lifestyles such as yours,
Yeah.
how often do you wish that you could just go to the website, renew your building permit,
It's a
as
matter
an
of
example?
convenience.
Absolutely. And that's what technology is about. That's what the future is about, having more online accessibility. So you can do your City Hall business, whatever you want to call it.
Without taking the trip.
Right, without taking the trip, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you're at your camp, when you're at home with the children, you should be able to have more access as well. So, to summarize, this is basic business. This is what we do in our company. This is what other small businesses do around Sault Ste. Marie.
Right.
Try to look for inefficiencies and try to close those gaps.
Sounds like you have a plan. So I guess that brings me to my next question. If you're re-elected on council and elected in Ward 1, what are your first kind of priorities or goals that you'll set out to achieve in detail? I mean, I know it's, obviously, for job development and good quality of life and all of that, but
Yeah.
in terms of an actual plan, like what are your top priorities?
Okay. One of the first priorities, as you alluded to, is entrepreneurship and business. I'm a great believer that we should have ambassadors at City Hall. So if you're a business, a small business, doesn't matter, existing, new business, whatnot, you should be able to call up City Hall to say, hey, I'm thinking of expanding my business. I'm not sure how to do this. You should be assigned an ambassador or an account manager.
Right.
And say, Riley, congratulations, we were here, we want to help you.
Here's the resources.
Exactly. But how that person navigate through City Hall for you,
Right.
so that you can focus on your business. You can focus on your day-to-day without trying to figure out, do I go to the planning department first? Do I go to legal? Where do I go?
Right.
So you'll be assigned an account manager. The other piece too that I want to look at is seniors and families, quality of life.
Right.
It's so important. And so we have done a great job with the Hub Trail as one example.
Absolutely.
But we need to expand on that and understand that seniors use it, not just for walking, but they also have their own scooters and so forth.
Right.
Is it friendly to those individuals? Families, we need more family activities, free activities. When I started on council just 2.5 years ago, I worked with the public library and the Downtown Association, and here's a free activity that I created in partnership. And it's a historical walking tour, absolutely free.
That's awesome.
It is. These are simple ideas, but this is what we need.
And you know, lots of cities do that. I've done a lot of traveling, and almost everywhere I've gone, like one of the first things they recommend you do is the free historical
Yeah.
walking tour, because you get a
Right.
feel for the city, and then from there you kind of know what businesses you want to go and visit and which ones,
Yeah.
you know, kind of tickle
Yeah.
your fancy, for lack of a better word. And it's a great way to kind of draw in a crowd, right?
Exactly. And the other piece too is out-migration. Our young people, they do want to come back to the Sault. But not just that, we're close with the Goma University and Sault College. And to see how we can harness their students and how to keep them here. I'm going to basically give you a compliment. You're young.
Right.
The people around the studio are young.
Right.
Isn't it wonderful that you are here?
Oh, it
and,
is.
And thank you. And Sault College and Goma University have great programs. So how could we do that bridge? Once you graduate, you stay in the community.
And segue into jobs that are actually here.
Exactly. And I don't think we do a very good job with the inventory of what jobs there are here or potential jobs. And so basically the out-migration, we can easily shrink that.
Cater to the needs of.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Sandra, for coming in and sharing a little bit about your platform with us. We'll be back on Civic Affairs with our next guest, Ozzie Grandinetti, just after this short break.
Welcome back to Civic Affairs, live from the ONNtv studios. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Councillor Ozzie Grandinetti of Ward 6. Get that in for the last time. Ward 6 moving to Ward 5.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, Ozzie.
Thank you for having me.
The first question I wanted to ask you is, I've heard out on the street that you feel council is rubber stamping what city staff brings forward as a council meeting rather than sending it back. And I say that when the new council will be new, but city staff will remain the same more or less. Does council need to make suggestions and things, send things back to city staff more than they're doing in the last 4 years?
I can't comment on the last 4 years, but the last year and a half, I think we could work a little closer with staff.
Right, you're right.
As to the bigger issues, rather than just staff bringing something forward to council and then I shouldn't say us rushing through it during a council meeting, but us just taking a few minutes to go over it. And I think we should take more time rather than just rubber stamping it.
Yeah, that's what I find, that, the issues chew on them a bit, and it seems like the consent agenda in particular is rushed a lot of the times. And these issues, particularly with the spending that the new council will face, maybe require a little bit more time in terms of, less urgency.
I do agree with the consent agenda, because there are many items that are on the consent agenda that I don't think should be on, and they are spending items. A lot of times we pull them and talk about it afterwards,
Right.
but I think that should be done before it actually gets on our agenda.
Actually, quickly, while we're talking about the consent agenda, if you can explain to the viewers how items get pulled off the consent, what is the criteria when councillors do that?
Well, at one time there was as asked for the agenda review committee, there was a council, the mayor, and staff, that we decide what went on consent and what went on the agenda. Now I believe there isn't a councillor that's on the agenda review
there
committee.
isn't. That's right.
Which I hope things change next council. But as for consent, if we want something pulled, we'll just ask the mayor and the clerk to pull it as soon as we see it, once we get to agenda or before the meeting, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay, great. The industrial tax rate, small industrial, large industrial, we're totally non-competitive. What do you think needs to be done in the new term to deal with this situation?
I think we've got to drop the industrial tax rate, as we pay too much taxes. I've always said, if you have high taxes, you're not going to bring jobs into the Sault Ste. Marie. And
Right.
I've been getting a lot of complaints from business owners who are zoned industrial, in which their taxes are going to be doubling within the next 10 years. And
Right.
they just can't afford it, especially when some of these businesses are competing with businesses that are in Quebec, who have the lowest utility rates in North America and some of the cheapest industrial taxes in Canada.
Right, and you look at North Bay is like 1.16, and we're like almost more than double that. It's just preposterous that we need to do that, and it's a shame because we have the community to do business with. People can't afford to live in the GTA anymore, and we're just not doing it. So I think the consensus is that the new council needs to address that more come December.
Well, yes, I do agree with that, and I agree that if we have lower taxes, you'll bring in more business, because I believe that scares a lot of businesses away is the taxes.
What are you doing differently now in the new campaign here, and if you're re-elected, versus what you've done in the past as a councillor? Are you doing anything differently with the new Ward 5
No, I'm not.
for your campaign?
No, nothing at all. Still knocking on a lot of doors, hitting the rural community, the most westerly part, Airport Road, in that area. Now that we have Old Goulet Bay Road and 4th Line, I'm also hitting that area too. So
What are
just
people
working harder.
telling you at the door? Are they fed up or?
Yes, most people are fed up of we pay too much taxes. Complain about the utilities, but they know that's not municipal. But the biggest complaint are taxes and services. That's what I'm getting, and it's not just from my ward. It's all over Sault Ste. Marie.
People feel that they're not getting the right bang for the buck.
That's right.
All right, Ozzie, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with Councillor Ozzie Grandinetti right after this commercial. Welcome back to Civic Affairs on ONNtv. We have Ward 5 Councillor Ozzie Grandinetti. Do you like 5 or do you like 6? Which ward?
I think they should have left it the same.
Yeah. Oh wow. That's for another day.
That's another day.
Yeah. You're on the Downtown Association Board, Ozzie. How do you feel about these out-of-town consultants? Roger Brooks, 3 out of the 47 recommendations, and now they're bringing another consultant, apparently not local. Do we not have local people that can come up with these recommendations?
I thought, myself being on the downtown board, I thought Roger Brooks was a good spend, because this is what he does. He goes into communities and looks to see how our downtown is and how to revitalize it. So I think that was a good spend. As for this, I believe it's $60,000 that
Right.
they want to spend on this other consultant. Staff tells us that Roger Brooks doesn't do what this other consultant does. Now, when you ask staff if they could do it, they tell us no, that they're not they don't have the proper qualifications to do that type of work. So I just wonder what staff could actually do so we could get less consultants, rather than spending money on consultants.
Well, I think you're right. With the Downtown Association or with the Branding Council, and the city is not in the business of doing that, but I think local talent would be a better way to go.
Exactly. I believe in do whatever you can locally, and I also believe that we spend too much money on consultants.
Yeah,
we have engineers, we have good staff at City Hall and the Board of Works. I think that they should take most of this on themselves,
right?
Rather than hiring a consultant, because once they hire this consultant, they pretty much follow the consultant's recommendations.
Right.
And they don't want to bend the rules a little bit for this consultant, and it just happened up here on Great Northern Road with the sidewalk issue with Algoma Water Tower.
That's right. And you see kind of a collision course happening with a certain mayoralty candidate and other candidates if they win. The analogy from city staff and these new people, if they get elected isn't going to jive. Something's going to be in a collision course with the points of view.
Yes, exactly.
What are your goals and priorities for the next 4 years if you're reelected for the new term?
Zero tax increase. That's my goal, and staff says they can't do it. I know we could do it. Try to change the way they bring the budget to us, rather than each department come to us and tell us what they want for money.
Right.
We as the city or a committee, whatever, this is what we have, this is what we're giving you.
That's right.
Make ends meet.
I agree with
It's
you.
no different than running your house.
That's right.
Giving your kid an allowance.
That's
If you could only afford $10 to give him, you're going to give him $10 rather than 20.
And I agree with you. Public sentiment has it going that direction. And it's not the mayor and council's fault. It's provincial governments raising the minimum wage, 25%, everything else going up around us. People are just tired of tax increases.
Tax increases. The minimum wage, I do agree with. I agree with them raising it, but I disagree with them all at once. Do it over a couple of years or something. Rather than having it all at once.
Well, the new premier will freeze the existing one for 2019.
Yes.
But I sense the electorate is just tired of all the tax increases.
Yes.
And so the collision is, if you keep these studies and consultants, it's not going to match with the 0%.
No.
I think 0% is doable too.
I'll put any money on it that it's doable. We know we could do it. It's just trying to work together with staff, try to get it done.
Is there anything you've left undone, Ozzie, from this past term, the year and a half that you've been since 2017?
No, there were some issues that I thought were going to come to council the last two meetings, but they didn't. Another issue was a parking issue, and I read one of Councillor Shoemaker's articles, I guess, on Facebook that's his goal for the next 4 years is to get staff parking.
Right, I saw that.
Which I disagree with, which we're allowed to disagree with each other, but I disagree with that. But I don't. That's something I don't want to do, is charge fees to staff to park. I disagree with that, because everywhere you look at, we got extra fees. The building permits are astronomical in this city. We're one of the only cities in Ontario that has building permits. That you have to purchase a building permit for anything you do on your home. Any small project, and then if you don't have one, they come to your house and they fine you. The cost of the permit plus the permit. Fees are the biggest. Like I said, fees, taxes, and people are fed up with utilities. Like, we can't afford to live in our own homes anymore.
That's like an extra tax, isn't it?
It is exactly. It is, and I argue with the CBO, and he tells me we have to have building permit fees for your roofs, windows, and that. And I disagree with him, and he tells me that we have to have those because we don't have development charges.
Right.
Well, last winter I did my homework and I called a number of municipalities throughout the province who do not have building permits for your small ticket items on your homes. And they've all told me development charge is a tax. It's got nothing to do with the building
Without
department.
a doubt.
And now with the permits going up 5%, people are even more upset.
We got to leave it there, Ozzie. Thanks very
Thank
much
you very
for
much.
coming in, and good luck the rest of the way to October 22nd.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
No problem. Riley will be back with Rick Niro, Councillor for Ward 4, right after this commercial break.
Welcome back to Civic Affairs. I'm here with our last guest of the evening, Rick Niro, who is in Ward 4 and running again for Ward 4.
That's correct.
That's correct. Now, you have some experience on council. You've
Yes.
spent a total of 20 years
That's correct.
on council.
That's correct.
Now, what's to be said about experienced incumbents versus new blood? That's been a hot topic this election with so many new faces. Based on your experience, what do you think?
Well, I think the experienced incumbent is going to take care of, in an expeditious way, in a professional manner, right off the bat, dealing with constituent issues, dealing with city decisions, by not delaying, by sending back to staff if they don't have to. And that's not to say that some reports from staff shouldn't go back, but when there's delays, some decisions have to be made expeditiously.
Right.
So that experience helps that happen. It really comes into play when you're dealing with budgets.
Right.
We're almost at $200 million. It's a big budget. We've been working with expenditure reductions. We know where those are. So when you're experienced, you've gone through them, and you're not repeating, you're not putting staff through repetitious work.
Right.
So I think that's the big advantage of having an incumbent.
Absolutely. Now, with that being said, how do you respond to people who say that council needs to be completely revamped this election?
Well, it's hard to disagree when you're going door to door and people say that council should be revamped.
Right.
During that discussion, different pieces will come out of that, and you will get a sense of why they're looking for council to be revamped. But my experience has been that through the 20 years that I've been doing this at the end of this term, the issues are not changing.
Right.
Their taxation, it's the economy of the city, it's youth migration, and it's the efficiency of our city services.
Right.
Those have been consistent all along. We've been working on them. You may say, as if you have incumbents, well, why haven't you been able to solve these issues? They're not easily solved. I can tell you that they are not easily solved.
And I mean, I've always said I think it's a little easier to say what council should do when you've never sat on council. By the same token, it's one person on council with 12 or 11 other people. Now it'll be 10 total. So it's not just about what one person thinks. It's also about, how the other people vote as well.
That's correct. And I'll take you to an example of when you're running as a new candidate. You will hear from new candidates, as you may have heard from me had you been around when I first ran,
Right.
that my priority was going to make sure that we got rid of studies, that we were doing too many studies, paying money for nothing. It did not take me long to find out after I was successful in taking office on council that a lot of these studies were necessary.
Right.
You could not apply for funding if you didn't have a third-party study.
It's almost like a necessary red
It's a
tape.
prerequisite to ask for money from one of the other two levels of government.
Right. Now, yeah, and I think that is a common that's something we hear all the time, and even from counselors, why all the studies, but that kind of sheds some light onto why, to some extent,
To some extent.
that they are necessary. Just a quick question before we take a break. Have you ever dealt, in your experience on council, with being on council with a whole lot of new blood?
Yes, I have.
And what was that like? Because that could happen.
It's amazing how quick the learning curve
Right.
happens. So I experienced new council. I experienced councils that, for the most part, were reelected.
Right.
And I would say that business is going to go on. Do not want to leave the impression if council gets half of council goes away and some new candidates.
Of course, so.
They're going to figure it out. It's and counselors, incumbent counselors help.
Right.
In answering those questions on how we do business, what's our procedure, because that's the first part that a new counselor has to get through is the procedure in doing business.
Absolutely.
So, how do I get this on the table? Can I ask this question? Am I in conflict
The
with this?
logistical kind of-
All of those things, and when you have a new council, I have not seen any incumbents shy away from helping those people.
Well,
Those
that's good
people
to hear.
were reelected, or elected the first time.
Right.
People wanted them to be on council, and who are we to say, no,
they shouldn't.
we're going to help them.
Absolutely. Well, that's good to hear. Now, we'll be back with Rick Niro just after this break, and we'll talk a little bit more about his experience on council so far and his hopes for council moving forward. Stay tuned on Civic Affairs. We're back on Civic Affairs for our final segment, and we're here with Rick Niro. Now, we've talked a little bit about your experience on council. You've had a lot of it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the future. What work do you think still needs to be done on council, and how do you hope to contribute to that environment?
Well, the common theme, common theme of work to be done, as I said earlier, is pretty consistent, and we're hearing that at the doors, at least I am. People are not really that opposed to small increases in taxation and municipal taxes, but the service that they receive has to be worth those increases.
Makes sense.
So it's the efficiency and it's the quality of the service that we provide. One of the big ones is youth migration. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are constantly working on that. Council cannot resolve that on their own. I mean, there's 3 reasons why youth migrates out of the city. They're going to post-secondary education, they're going to look for employment, or they just want to move to a bigger city and experience that life.
Right.
I mean, through the programs, we have to have employers working with our post-secondary education system to make sure the programs are in place so that these students that have to go out of town to get the post-secondary education can have it here, so they can have their internships in the Soo, because for the most part, if you're going to get your post-secondary education in another city, you're going to get placed in that city for intern work,
And then you create a
you're
life
probably going to get a job there.
Absolutely. So out-migration definitely has been an issue for years. And I think kind of related to that issue is this question of creating a healthy business environment, be it in terms of industrial taxes, commercial taxes, or just in general the opportunities available here. Do you think council's done a good job in creating a healthy business environment?
Council has been working towards doing a good job
Right.
in creating that, and you're correct, because the root of all the issues that we have in this municipality and that happen in any municipality are the economics in that municipality. If you can create jobs, all these other things go away. You don't have to raise taxes, because if you create jobs, that means you're creating more assessment
like a
in the
domino
city.
effect.
It's domino, but if you fix it at that point, you are also fixing all these other areas. Our assessment goes down, and if we don't have assessment goes down because of tax appeals or what have you, and you don't have new assessment coming in, you have no choice but to raise taxes a little bit to make up and do the same work you did the year before.
Right. Now, what from your time on council so far, what's been the resolution or idea that you've been the most proud of, that you'll kind of hope to carry on as your legacy?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a legacy, but it is a problem that we have been having in Sault Ste. Marie, and I'm sure that other municipalities are having it. And it's a problem of minimum standards in dirty yards. And it seems like it's getting bigger and bigger. And 4 years ago, when I came back to council, because I had originally ran from 88 to 2000,
Right.
I was away for 10 years, came back in 2010. I came back with a view that I wanted to visit the dirty yards bylaw and the minimum standards. And we did that. Staff looked at it. We were more aggressive that way. But it seems that those issues are compounding. We have them in the West End. We have them in a lot of areas of the city. So my intent is to, if I am reelected, I'm going to bring this back forward. We need to look at them again. But I think the bylaws are okay. It's the process it takes to put the bylaws in effect.
Right.
There's a lot of legalities involved. We need to ask our staff, both in the building department and the legal department, on how we can expedite these problems, because a lot of these complaints come from constituents who are very proud of their yards, who take care of them, and every so often there's a house, and a lot of times they're unoccupied.
Right.
They're owned from out of town owners, and it's very, very difficult to get them to comply.
Right.
So that's something that I am bringing back. It's not an earth-shattering thing, but it is a big thing on my plate in
Absolutely.
Ward 4.
And it's something you've heard from constituents?
It comes reoccurring. It's very reoccurring. It's something that needs to be solved because it goes to the naturally gifted of Sault Ste. Marie. You need to clean these areas up.
Absolutely, and I think that falls into this issue of compliance, and there's some kind of disconnect in between the policy and what's happening in reality.
That's right.
Well, glad to hear that you hope to rectify that. That's all the time we have, so I want to thank you for coming in and sharing a little bit
My
of your...
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. And we will be back to close up the show on Civic Affairs just after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome to your final segment of Civic Affairs for the evening. Now, that was quite a lineup.
Great show, yes.
Seems like the common issues that keep coming up are taxation, out-migration, and job opportunities. I mean, I feel time and time again, be it incumbent or new candidate, this is what we're hearing.
That's right, and that segment you did about the large and small industrial tax rates, this is something that the new council has to address because that's going to be the key piece of this community
For the
moves
long term.
forward.
Absolutely.
Never
And-
mind the branding is one thing, but this is just as important.
Yeah, if we're not viable, I mean, that's an issue. And actually, tomorrow, I'm interviewing Councillors Marchie Bruni and Frank Fata. They both provided some commentary in my article. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about what happened, what led to the industrial taxes being raised, and what can realistically be done to rectify the
Yes.
issue under new council. So tune into that. It'll be at 3 p.m. live tomorrow.
And they're both passionate
They're
about it.
very passionate about it. I want to remind everybody that there is no episode next week. Because
No, it's Thanksgiving. It's
And-
that holiday.
Then we have one more episode. We don't have our guests lined up yet, so those names will be released at a later date. But there will be one episode before
That's
the
right.
election, which takes place on Monday the 22nd. Don't forget to vote.
We'll keep them suspense where we go
Absolutely,
with
yes.
that.
Now, I just want to quickly, before we go, promote or let you guys know we are hosting a mayoral debate tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It'll be live on TV. All the candidates will be participating, and it's taking place at Spear Heights. There's 150 seats for those who want to go and watch it
Yes,
live.
big auditorium.
Absolutely, and also tune in at 12 p.m. on the 4th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, because each ward will be interviewed in that order. Their candidates will be here in the studio, and there will be a live debate for each candidate to kind of share their piece before voting day
On the 22nd.
on the 22nd. Now that brings us to the close of our show. Thank you for another great
Thanks,
show, Andy.
Riley. Appreciate
And
it.
stay tuned for more news coming up on TV.